Hello and welcome back to part two of this little devlog series I'm doing, where I'm going to attempt to create some sort of character customizer in Unreal Engine using the DTH workflow. In the last part, we set up a starting ROM in DazToHue with some full body morphs. We processed everything in Houdini, and we've exported all the files out, which is what we can see here. So now it's time to jump into Unreal and start putting things together. So I'm going to create a brand new project for this. I have no real plans or ideas for what this character customizer is going to be used for. If it'll ever get released in any form, much less what I'm going to call it. So for now, I'm just going to call it Studio. And I don't think I need any starting templates. So I'm just going to pick a blank template. Alright. Now I'm going to change a few project settings. I always like to drop the near clip plane, especially when I'm working on things like materials. I like to get super close to the characters, and so lowering the clip plane helps with that. Also want to enable compute skin cache. And I think that's all I need for now. We might change some things later on. So rather than restart, I'm just going to close the project, browse to where it is, and I want to move some files across that I've set up earlier. Obviously I want the DazToHue Unreal Engine content, and I have some animations that these are from the Epic's City Crowd sample pack, which you can find on the marketplace, and I've just retargeted them onto the Genesis 9 skeleton. Whether or not I end up using these, I'm not sure yet, but I'll just copy them across for now. So open up our project again. Alright. Shit, sorry, there's one more thing I wanted to bring into this project. So I'm going to do that as well. I want to migrate a scene from this MetaHuman lighting project. I'm going to use one of its preset lighting scenes as the basis for my character customizer map. This is going to take ages compiling shaders, so I'll probably fast forward through this bit. Alright, that's finished compiling. The only reason I wanted to come into this MetaHuman's lighting project is, like I say, because I want to export this map out of it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to migrate it over to my new project. That's all we needed from that. So now we can go back into our project. It is blowing a gale outside, so if you hear a rattling noise, that's my windows rattling in the wind. Hopefully it doesn't come through. Alright, now we can start to get organized. Just going to rename and organize a few things. make a bunch of folders. Alright, so this is the map from the MetaHumans lighting preset that I'm going to use for our customizer scene. Alright, what do I want to do first? I think rather than using the DazToHue assets directly, I'm going to copy what I need out of it into our prototype characters folder. So I want the skeleton, those pose assets, and the animation blueprint. I think that's all I'm going to need. So we'll copy those there. Rename them. Actually create a folder for the pose assets as well. All right. Just going to make sure the pose assets are pointing to the right skeleton. Same with the animation blueprint. So this is the animation blueprint that comes with DazToHue. I'm going to delete the ARKit mappings. We're not going to need those. I'll keep the rig solver and facial morphs and all of the joint corrective morphs. Alright, let's I think now import our character. This will take a while. for the dialog box to appear and also to import, just because of the sheer number of morphs it has. Okay, so we'll look at the import settings. It's a brand new project, so they're all of their defaults. So I want to change a couple of things. Do want to import the mesh, obviously. Under advanced, I'm going to import morph targets. I don't need the animation. I don't want it to create a physics asset for me. I also don't want it to create materials for me. I'll do that myself. I will set it to look for materials in future under the parent, so that any materials we do create when we next have to re-import this character, which we will, I'm sure, it should automatically assign the materials we make. So I think that's all I need to change. So I'm going to import. Okay, that's finished importing. Just have a quick look at it. Let's see, we have all our joint corrective morphs. Further down we'll have our facial morphs, and at the bottom we'll have our physics and full body morphs. Now some of these will work alright applied as just morphs, but the ones that needed reference skeletons, things like the short, obviously aren't going to work without the skeletal changes underneath. Morphs obviously don't alter the skeleton, they just alter vertex positions. So to alter the skeleton we need pose assets, which will do both at once, the skeletal changes and the morph. So let's import those now. Just going to save everything. So we'll go to import, and this time we'll start with our physics pose asset animation. So for this one, we'll leave everything as it was, except we don't need the mesh. I'll untick mesh. We're just going to import the animation. Let's do the same for our full body pose asset animation. So we now have both of those. So I open, say, the full body animation. You can see when it comes to our short full body morph, we are getting the skeletal change and the morph being driven at the same time. This is obviously an animation sequence, so what we need to do is convert it to a pose asset. Just going to browse to where our export files are. Going to open up the FBM pose asset names file. So you're going to want these names, so I'm just going to select all and copy. And if we come up to create asset, create pose asset from current animation, I'll put it into my pose asset folder. I'll call it PAS prototype full body morph. Now with those names in the clipboard, I can right click up here and paste all pose names. I want to make it an additive. The base pose will be the FBM rest pose. Going to convert to additive and save. So we now have a pose asset for our full body morphs. And again, it will drive both the skeletal changes and the morph with a single 0 to 1 slider. And really that's the core of this character customization system that I'm working towards. It's all about just driving 0 to 1 values of these various pose asset animation curves. Let's do the same for our physics pose asset. Now these are morphs only, so there are no bone transforms happening, but the process is exactly the same. If I go to our export folder, I'll open our PHY pose asset names, and copy all of those, turn it into a pose asset. Okay. Now that we have our pose assets, I'm going to save everything. And I don't need these animation sequences anymore. I can delete those. So we have all our pose assets there. I can preview some of these idle animations that I'd retargeted. Actually, these are all assigned to the Genesis 9 archetype skeleton. So what I'm actually going to have to do is select them all and replace the skeleton with our prototype skeleton. Need to do the same for the face animations. Take a look at those. Okay, the reason it's not working is because we need to assign our animation blueprint to our skeletal mesh. If I open that up, search for post, select our animation blueprint. Now we should be getting something. Seems to work. Check one of the body animations. Again, I don't know if I'm going to use these. Thought it'd be handy to have just in case. See, that one could be quite good for a character customizer screen. So the one we exported from Daz has the character moving left and right, which ideally you want the head, I think, to be staying fairly centered. But we could use multiple animations and set up some sort of state switching. The fingers didn't retarget particularly well, so we might fix that up later on as well. This would be another good one for a character customizer. Looks pretty similar actually. Yeah, the fingers haven't come across that well. But we'll leave it with that for now. We also have the one we exported from Daz, so I might bring that in. Keep it in a separate folder for now. So let's import that. That was this one. We want to trim the first few frames that had our retargeting poses on it. That should loop pretty seamlessly now. Yep. So that one's worked quite well. The retargeting was done in Houdini, whereas the other ones were done in Unreal Engine. It looks like I will need to mess with the finger retargeting pose a bit. Alright, what next? Start with a few blueprints. So I'm going to make a blueprint for our character, our prototype character. I'm just going to make it an actor. It's not something we need to possess as a player. Just assign it our Daz idle animation for now. Now I'm going to make another blueprint. Do I want all these on the maps? I don't know. Maybe. Alright, it's going to make another blueprint for the actual customizer functionality. So this will contain the UI widgets and all the logic for driving the sliders, those 0 to 1 values. This one I'll make a pawn because we are going to want to possess this one. And add a camera to it. CD camera. And we'll need to offset it a bit. Also going to need to scale up this sphere, this dome. That should work. If I come to our customizer pawn, we will auto possess for now player 0. So now if I hit play, we should be looking through that cine camera. Which we are. It's out of focus, so let's come to the camera. Focus settings, we'll set it to tracking. We'll tell it to track our prototype character. For now, we'll probably do some more fancy stuff with the character, with the camera later on. Now we should be in focus at least. Yep. Let's get some base materials onto our character for now. I'm not going to add textures for a little bit. I don't know the point where a character starts to look too realistic for YouTube in terms of nudity. So I'm gonna play it safe until I figure out something. We might add clothes or something down the track. But for now, let's just get some blank materials on there. Go to our DTH materials folder and grab these 3 material instances and copy those across. Also get our skin, regular skin material. Rename these. What I want to do, what I am doing, is giving the materials the same names as the materials slots, so that next time we import the character, it will automatically discover and assign them. So in this case, it's just called prototype tier. This will be my master skin material. And from that, we're going to create material instances. So we have the head, body, which includes our arms and legs, mouth, nails. I think that's it for now. We'll assign those. My occlusion. Okay. So if we come back to our animation blueprint, one of the nice things about pose assets is that you can, they don't turn your blueprint into a sort of spaghetti mess. They're quite, what I can do, for example, is just drop a full body morph pose asset, wire that up, and now any changes to the curves contained within this pose asset, so our full body morphs, will get applied. So to drive those curves, we can do something like a modify curve node, plug that in, and for its curve map, if I expose as a pin, I can then right click, add curve, and select from any of our animation curves on our skeleton. So if I pick something like the short one, we want the pose asset, which is the PAS one, not the morph. So always use the PAS versions. Now we just have this 0 to 1 value that we can manipulate. And like I say, that's pretty much all the sliders on our customers are going to be doing, is manipulating the 0 to 1 values for all of our full body morphs. So for example, if I set that to 1 and compiled, our character would be in its short state and the skeleton will line up perfectly. We can have, any, oh shit, are we crashing? We might be crashing. Yep, we've crashed. I found that 5.4 is particularly crashy. Very frustrating. So let's restart. Hopefully we haven't lost too much. Save often is the lesson I've learnt when working in 5.4. Let's try that again. So we'll go back into our animation blueprint. Find our full body morph. As I was saying, yeah, we can set these to any value between 0 and 1 to get a partially applied full body morph. So we'll come back to this. We don't want to drive them directly through the animation blueprint. We want some sort of UI to do it through. Open up our map again. All right. So one of the things we're going to need is a widget. Can't remember where they are. Widget blueprint. It's hard to come up with names. Now, I don't have a very good knowledge at all of widgets in Unreal Engine. So we'll figure this out as we go. We'll start with a canvas. Just sort of roughing out what we're going to need for some sliders, basically. Probably the right way to do it, which you might do later on, is to actually create a new sort of widget type that appears up here, user-defined one. But we can just reuse over and over again rather than copying and pasting all of these. We might actually do that. I cannot remember if they are just the same or how they work. Does that show up? It does. Okay. In that case, we'll do it that way. Cool. So you want some way to expose. So we can sort of change the label. Alright, there would have been a cut in the video there as I went off and did some research. So I wasn't sure how best to set this up. In the previous one I made, I just put everything under the customiser widget as separate slider controls, but this time around I'm trying to go for a more modular setup. So we've created this custom slider widget that we can reuse over and over again. And I wasn't 100% sure on how to expose things like the label up to the parent. I know we could use things like bindings, but from what I've read, bindings fire every frame, so aren't as performant. So instead I wanted to use an event model, and that's what I needed to look up because I wasn't 100% sure how to do it. So this is our custom slider widget. I'm just going to rename some of these that we want to expose as variables. call this label. And I'm going to expose both of these as variables, which they are. If I come into the graph, I'm going to add another variable called label. That will be text, I think. You also want to be able to configure the sliders range. Some of them will be 0 to 1, some of them might be -1 to 1. So we'll have a slider min, slider max. Get rid of that. Sorry, that was something I was testing before. We'll recreate that. So I'll come off our, I'm not going to need tick, probably not going to need pre-construct. On construct, we will grab our label, set text to our label. Do need to expose these as well. Something like that. Maybe I'll put those there. We're also going to want an event that gets fired when the slider value changes. So come back to the slider on value change event. We'll create a new event dispatcher. Actually, we'll give it a value property. So when the slider value changes, we'll call that event, pass it the value. All right. So now on our custom slider widget, we have these properties exposed, so I can start to label them. Why didn't that work? Maybe that's okay. That just looks like that needs to be pre-construct. Set some defaults as well. Our min will be 0. Our default max will be 1. So now we should be able to have it negative 1 to 1 if we want. I'd actually also want to be able to add a second label so it's like thin on one side, heavy on the other. No, one of them's not showing up. Alright, before we go any further, let's add this widget to our screen so we can start to test some things. So do that in the level blueprint. Going to add first a reference to our prototype blueprint as well. I can't remember how to do that either. I think you can just drag them. Yeah. So I'm using the level blueprint as, I guess, the glue that's going to bind everything together. It'll be sort of handling communication between the widget and the two blueprints, the prototype and customiser blueprint. So all the communication will be routed through the level blueprint. That's my plan at the moment anyway. Customizer first. Now what? Spawn a widget. Create widget. Let's make a variable for that. Sorry, I'm just referencing my old first attempt at this project occasionally, just so I don't spend too long trying to remember what things are, what nodes to use. But we are deviating from this old setup a little bit. Alright, so with that, if we run, we should see our widget, which we do. The reason we're getting that is because when I was experimenting, actually we'll delete that so we can go through it again. So we have our slider, when our slider value changes, it's going to call this slider value changed event. So back up on our customizer widget, we're going to want to listen for that event. And so what we can do, if we go with this heavy, for example, let's rename this actually to thin heavy. Because we have this, we created this event dispatcher, then on the customizer we can add an event to listen for that. So we now have this event for this thin heavy slider that's going to get called every time the slider value changes. And so for now, I'm just printing the value of that slider like that. So when we run our map, you can see we're getting a value from -1 to 1. All right. One thing to note is if we actually click in the screen, then we lose our mouse cursor, so we can't use the widget anymore. So let's have a look at fixing that next. So I'm actually going to do that in the customizer blueprint. And it's another thing that I can't remember how to do off the top of my head. So I'm going to have to refer back to this, but I'll probably have to blur this because it's not going to be safe for YouTube. Let me just refer to what I did previously. Just can't remember the name of the function. Okay. So if we get a controller, what is that? Set show mouse cursor. That's what I want. So now, even if I click into the scene, we keep our mouse cursor and we can still use our widget. All right, so let's now figure out how we get those values from our widget all the way through to ultimately our animation blueprint is where they need to end up. So you want to end up feeding them into here. So what I'm going to do is create a data structure. This structure is going to hold all of the values for all of our full body morph curves. My thinking is that somewhere down the line we'll be able to save the contents of this structure. So when you've customized a character, all its values will be in this DNA structure. We can save that out, and then when our actual game begins, we can load the right DNA structure onto the character. It's kind of my plan at the moment. So let's create, they'll be all float values. Let's call it, just start with thin and heavy as a test. The names of these don't necessarily matter. They don't have to match the curve names, I don't think. I'm giving them the same names as the animation curves, in the off chance that there's a way to look up these by key, but I don't think there is, but sadly, but you'll see what I mean in a little bit. So we have this DNA structure. So on our customizer, we want to have a copy of that structure in a variable. So let's call it now that we have that structure, we can get it, and we can set member variables on it. We want to expose both thin and heavy. So remember, this is our thin heavy slider. So we want the thin heavy pins exposed. Now we just need to remap the value. So this is a -1 to 1 value at the moment. So we can do something like, what's it called? Map range clamped, I think. So if it's the out will always be 0 to 1. If it's 0 to 1, that's easy. If it's 0 to -1, just gonna print that for now. So when it goes in the negative, it's being flipped to a 0 to 1 value, which is what we want. So that will be our thin, that will be our heavy values. Also going to expose the DNA variable. Now we also want to dispatch another event anytime any of the slider values change. So we'll create another event. We'll say DNA changed. We'll call that. And we actually want to pass a variable of DNA structure. So now when the slider value changes, the values of these two members get changed and the whole structure gets passed to this DNA changed event dispatcher. What have I done wrong there? Odd. All right. So now back in our level blueprint, we can get our customizer. Sorry. No, we want to actually do our blueprint, but our widget. Sorry. So we get that. We should be able to bind to DNA changed. Organize things a bit as we go. Our initial setup. Our event bindings. Needs an event, so we can now add a custom event. So at this point, our level blueprint will now be getting a copy of the DNA structure every time a slider value has changed. Now what I want to do is pass that DNA structure through to our prototype blueprint. So this is a long chain of events happening, sort of being fired one after the other. I'm sure there's other ways to do this. We could probably pass the DNA structure straight to the anim blueprint from the level blueprint by getting a reference to the anim blueprint, but I'm going to do it this way. It's just the way that feels most logical to me, I guess. So I'm going to go to our prototype blueprint, and I'm also going to add a DNA variable to it. Going to expose that. Now back on our level blueprint, we can get our prototype. We can set the DNA on it to the updated DNA structure. Like that. So now we have our updated DNA values going right through to our character, our prototype blueprint. So now we just need to pass these to the animation blueprint. So if I open our animation blueprint, and I go to the event graph. First thing I want to do is get the owning actor. We're going to cast it to our prototype blueprint. Let's set a variable for that. Now I'm going to go into the thread safe update animation. And sorry, our animation blueprint also needs a DNA variable. It doesn't need to be exposed, I don't think. So now we are going to use property access, and we're going to find our prototype blueprint. Down the bottom we're going to get its DNA file. Use that to update the one in our animation blueprint. Something like that. Okay, so now back to our graph. I'm going to remove this curve. Going to save because this part's sometimes prone to crashing. Now, this list is going to end up quite long as we sort of build upon it. We're going to start by exposing the, what was it, thin. And heavy. Gonna get our DNA structure. We're going to break it. And this is where it'd be really useful to be able to just look up a structure's value by its name. As far as I can tell, there is no way to do that in blueprints. You can certainly do it in C++, so hence we're going to end up with two long nodes, our structure and our curve, but it could be worse. So now we just wire these up. And theoretically, that should work. So let's give it a go. And it's not. Alright, now we got to debug. So we know that these values are working. Let's see if these values are coming through to the level blueprint first. So let's break that print. Okay, so that event's not triggering. Oh, idiot. I want to come off this event, not that bind too, sorry. That will help, I think. Actually, if we do it that way. There we go. So we now have a working prototype of one slider going between thin and heavy. You can see what I was talking about in the last part. With the heavy morph, the hands will clip through the thighs. So we can fix that with our arm offset that we created. So now we have things more or less working. I can get rid of that. Pretty much just keep that. That's what we need. Alright, so I might call it a part there. We have a basic prototype working. In the next part, we'll add the rest of our sliders. We'll look at things like the arm offset. We might get into the jiggle physics as well. And just sort of try and make the UI look a bit better and just generally forge ahead. Try and improve things, but hope you found that useful, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.